Hi, Year 10 and I guess Year 11, and I guess Year 11 if you're watching as well. This is just a quick additional video to the one you may have already watched about this Migrants paper that we went through today, Year 10, just because I promised that I'd finish off going through question 5 with you, because we didn't get to do it in the lesson. So, question 5. Well, we're going to do sort of the same thing again, right? The first thing I'm going to do is go to my answer booklet and write 5 in the margin, because if I don't do that, then the examiner for OCRB might not mark it. A reminder, by the way, before I do this, that in the exam you only answer one of these. This case I'm going through both just so you've seen an answer to both, but you would only answer one in the exam. If you try and answer more than one, you're not being clever, you're being silly, you're wasting time, so don't do it. But the first thing I'm going to do second thing I suppose I'm going to do once I've written the number in the margin is just bug this question, right? So it's asking me how far do I agree again, give reasons for my answer, and it's saying migration to Britain increased between 1500 and 1900. So again, this is 2 time periods, right? The early modern period, which is from 1500 to 1750 for us, and the industrial period, which is from 1750 to 1900 for us. So this is again 2 time periods. They often do that on these sorts of questions, your 18 markers. And it's saying that it has increased between those times because of changes in attitudes towards migrants. Quite an interesting question. And again, actually, I think I disagree with that statement. And I'll show you a plan now again for how I might argue that if I was writing this out in full. Now again, I'm just gonna, if I were you, I would just do your sort of pie chart plans again. As I said, I kind of actually really disagree with this statement, quite strongly actually, I must say. And I am just going to split up my paragraphs. So this is my disagree side over here, and then this is my agree side on the right hand side. Okay, it's just a good way of getting me thinking about what I'm going to write. And then what am I going to write about in my paragraphs? Well, actually, I think a bigger reason in that time period, sorry if you can hear shouting in the background, it's just goals behind me. My window's open because it's hot in my room. As I was saying, I think a bigger reason actually why migration increases from 1500 to 1900, is actually because of the growth of the British Empire. So actually that's going to be my first paragraph that I might write. Because I know throughout that time that the British Empire is really growing dramatically throughout the world as Britain gains colonies, and I could talk about the Caribbean, couldn't I? You know this from year 7, 8 and 9 at Boulder. Jamaica or Trinidad and Tobago is another one we've spoken about, isn't it? I could also talk about expansion into Africa. You've spoken a lot about the Gold Coast colony in year 8 and year 9, or as it is now Ghana, Nigeria, South Africa, there are other ones. Nigeria was the Kingdom of Benin, another one that we studied in year 7 and year 8 at Boulder. But of course it's also expanding into India, right? And obviously today that's modern day India, Pakistan, Bangladesh and Burma as well, or Myanmar. This is a huge expansion, and that means Ireland, crikey, let's not forget Ireland, and all sorts of others besides. And all of that expansion means that the British Empire is really growing, and Britain is interacting with more and more people. And some of those people migrate to Britain. Of course, some of that is unfortunately forced through enslavement and the trafficking of people. A really good example of that, of course, if we're talking about individuals, is Francis Barber. I won't go into too much detail on him now. You can go and do some research about his remarkable and really positive, life with his owner, and then more like his father, really, Dr. Samuel Johnson. Francis Barber's ancestors are still here in the UK. It's a really remarkable story, really. So Francis Barber is one we could talk about there. Another one might be Bill Richmond, who of course is a freed slave. He's freed because he fights for Britain against the American rebels in the American Revolutionary War, and Britain stayed true to their word, and they release him from enslavement, and he comes to Britain, becomes a prize fighter, etc. Obviously, we've also spoken about people like Dido Elizabeth Bell here, or Ignatius Sancho is another one that you could talk about. And the one who you all love to talk about, because of course he introduces curry to England or Britain through the Hindustani coffee house, introduces shampooing to the UK, and becomes the shampooing surgeon to two kings, George IV and William IV. Of course, I'm talking about Dean Mohammed. So I think we can really argue there quite convincingly, can't we, that actually maybe a bigger reason for the growth of migration is to do with the empire rather than to do with what it says in the question, which is that is increased due to changes in attitudes. And I think in a similar way, we could argue that actually it's increasing because of trade. And specifically, I'd say trade in London or in Liverpool, which are, of course, the two big cities that we studied. There are others where it grows because of trade. Glasgow is another country like that, so is Dublin to a degree. That's not in Britain now. But trade in big cities of empire actually is another reason. There is goods coming from all over the world. It's a global trading network. And people working on those ships who are arriving in these ports of empire are coming from different parts of the world, usually in the empire. Of course, I'm talking here mainly about Lascar sailors who are coming from India, and Chinese sailors who were coming from the British colonies of Hong Kong and Shanghai, which become part of the British Empire in the 1850s and 60s. These migrants arrive on British trading ships. They're working on those, they're not owning those, let's be clear about that. These are low-paid jobs, working as stokers or sailors on these ships. And they settle in port towns or cities like Liverpool and London. Of course, I could add more here about actually how the trade encourages other people to come to Britain. For example, trade, or London being a centre of trade, attracts business people. Attracts business migrants. Particularly, it attracts migrants from Germany. It later attracts migrants, doesn't it, Jewish migrants really from Russia. They're coming here because Britain is a centre of trade. You could even argue people like Dean Mohammed are coming because it's such a hotbed of trade. There are so many opportunities to make money in London and Liverpool and places like that, especially because of the growth of global trade coming through the British Isles. So again, we could say trade is maybe a more important reason than changes in attitudes. I think also another reason we might say why the growth in migration, there's perhaps other reasons that are more important, is because of persecution. At home. What I mean by that is not in Britain. Persecution really is driving lots of different groups throughout the early modern and industrial period to want to come to Britain for safety? And I think we could talk about lots of groups here, couldn't we? The obvious one is Huguenots. Huguenots come as they are being attacked in France for being Protestant. They come to Britain because Britain is a Protestant country. It is a safe haven for them. They're also coming, by the way, for the trade and the commercial they're coming for trade and the commercial benefits that the British Empire has brought to places like London. But they're also becoming because it's a safe place to be as a Protestant migrant. It's not safe in France. We can talk about other examples. At the start of the early modern period, Jews arrive from Spain and Portugal as well, actually. We're talking about Sephardi Jews here as they are being attacked. The same thing plays out later for Jews from Russia. Jews arrive from Russia. We're talking about a bit later now. These Jews are arriving in the 15 and 1600s. These are, like I said, Sephardi Jews. These Jews, Ashkenazi Jews, mainly from Eastern Europe, are arriving in the 1800s. But they're coming from the same reasons. They arrive from Russia as they are being attacked. There's other examples here. Italians during the 1870s, whilst 60s, 70s, whilst Italy is becoming a country actually, lots of city-states are being joined together, people who disagree with what's happening in Italy are being attacked. They are being attacked for their political beliefs. Those migrants also come to Britain because they're being attacked. Germans, people like Friedrich Engels and Karl Marx, they're coming to Britain too because their political views are not tolerated in Germany, whereas they are in Britain. Britain doesn't agree with Karl Marx's ideas for communism, but they don't mind him talking about it and writing about it. He writes the Communist Manifesto, one of the most famous books in history, in the British Museum, in the Rotunda, in the middle, where he was working at the time. Karl Marx comes to England, he migrates here from Germany for safety, because, due to his political views, he's being attacked. Maybe not physically, but verbally in Germany. So, again, I think, really, persecution is probably a bigger reason why migrants are coming to Britain in the early modern and industrial period than changes in attitudes. Having said that, I want a level 9, so I'm going to write 4 paragraphs, 3 with what I believe, with the disagree side. But if I want a level 9, I have got to show some balance, so I need 1 paragraph which shows the other view, all right? And in the exam, we'd use it on one hand, on the other hand. And actually, I think we can make a pretty good case for saying it does change due to attitudes towards migrants, because of course attitudes towards certain religions change. I've already touched on this with the Huguenots. So this paragraph is going to be my agree paragraph, my counter argument. I'm going to say, well, yeah, attitudes towards religions, so religious attitudes change. What do I mean by that? Well, the big turning point comes in 1535. After that point, Henry VIII turns England, then what will become Britain, into a Protestant country. England is Protestant. After that point, England begins to welcome Protestant migrants. I'm going to draw a line down here, otherwise I'm going to run out of room. So England / Britain, because obviously that's what it's going to become, right? Starts to welcome Protestant migrants. The obvious example here is the one we've already mentioned, is the Huguenots. But also we might talk about poor Palatines, right? When the poor Palatines arrive in 1709, at least at first, the British public and the British government think that they are Protestant migrants, like the Huguenots, are very skilled and wealthy and will be good for the country, and so they are welcomed. The government put up this ramshackle, almost town of tents on Blackheath, a big parkland in East London. And actually they're quite well cared for, both by the government and by ordinary people who go and visit and give them money. They're very welcoming because they think they are Protestants, and Britain wants to protect Protestants. Now that doesn't last very long when they find out that in large part they're Catholics, not Protestants, and that they're mostly farmers, and Britain doesn't really need any more farmers at the time. And eventually, of course, in 1709, 5,000 are deported back to Germany, and the last few are rounded up, and in 1710, 3,000 are sent out to New York, and lots of them actually die on the journey across the Atlantic Ocean. But that's by the by. What I think this proves to us is that actually maybe attitudes are changing towards specific religions, i.e. Protestant Christianity, and that does result in a surge in migration of Protestants. The other example we might use, of course, here, if we wanted extra to back up our argument, is that, well, actually, there's another change in attitudes towards migrants, because, of course, going further back in history, in 1290, the Jews are expelled under the rule of Edward I. When Oliver Cromwell is the Lord Protector, not King, the ruler, though nonetheless, of England, he then invites Jewish migrants back to the country after a famous rabbi appeals to him to support Jews who are being attacked, Sephardi Jews being attacked in Spain and Portugal. And Jews begin to come back to the country. Of course, there are still kind of stereotypes held against them of being semi-criminal, lots of them, etc., which aren't true. But again, it shows that maybe attitudes towards migrants are changing, and that increases migration. All the Jews had left in 1290, they're then invited back in the 1640s. So again, is my counter-argument that I would use. But really, in a nutshell, that is it. The other thing which I promised to you that I would sort of walk you through is how you might answer or write a conclusion, if you were completing, aiming for a level 9 and you wanted to have a conclusion. So give me 30 seconds, I'm just loading up a PowerPoint slide so I can have them in front of me. I'll just get them exact for you. So if you're writing conclusions, I've got it for us now. I would be using the following sentence starters. You're going to write 3 sentences, and you're going to say something like, in conclusion, I agree, or I wholly agree. That means like 100% entirely. I partly agree or disagree. With this statement, because although in many ways the fact that shows that. Now that probably just sounds like a random selection of words at the moment, so let me explain how I might use that if I had answered question 5, which again, as a reminder, says that migration to Britain increased from 1500 and 1900, mainly because of changes in attitudes towards migrants. So I might be saying something like this. In conclusion, I actually wholly disagree with this statement, because actually there were more important reasons for the growth in migration in this period, such as the development of the British Empire, London and Liverpool's growth as trade centres, and persecution, full stop. Although it is fair to say that religious attitudes do change, which in part increase migration, in many ways, lots of even those religious migrants were also coming for commercial reasons, that being the growth of empire, the possibilities of trade, or equally, they were coming because they were persecuted in their own country. The fact that Huguenots came as business people because they were being, and also because they were being attacked, shows that really there are other factors that are driving the migration of people to Britain in the period 1500 to 1900. So that's how I would write a conclusion if it were me, using those sentence starters. And really, year 10, in a nutshell, that is it. You have your exam on the first day back after half term. And as I keep on saying to you, fail to prepare, prepare to fail. You have got migration revision guides at home. There really is absolutely no excuse, because along with all of these videos, year 11's ones too, and your books, you've got plenty to be doing. Also a reminder that in the week after your exams week, so exams week is the week of the 5th of June, so the week beginning the 12th of June, your teachers are going to be checking that you've done all of the pages, made a mind map basically on every single double page spread from your migration revision guide. So actually, not only do you need to revise for your exams, because you should be doing that, it's in your best interest, but also if you don't do it, well, your homework is to revise. And if you don't do your homework, you're going to have to do detentions anyway. So you might as well get it done. Good luck. We believe in you, and all your history teachers are behind you.